Thank you, everybody. You're very welcome to Robotic Process Automation for Enterprises. And this event should take about 2 hours. We should finish just after 4 o'clock. For those of you who are on the call who aren't presenting, we kindly ask you to stay on mute. And if you have questions along the way, please use the Zoom chat function. As I mentioned, we're video recording this event. We'll finish after 4 o'clock, but certainly no later than 4:30. The speakers that we have today are experts in the topic of robotic process automation. Niall Fitzmaurice from Microsoft, Ruth Kearney from NightingaleHQ, Trevor Dagg from EVROS, and Nathan Kearns from Kainos. We'll introduce each of them in turn as we come to that section. The message I suppose we want to leave with everybody today is that we're in an era of unprecedented digitization. I don't know why I've put an S on digitization. Accelerate digitization. Data is the new currency, and it's a world in which a new data value mindset is needed. So every enterprise not only needs to look at data as the currency, but take a mindset on data value. And that's the backdrop to robotic process automation. How best to run, how to get greater productivity, but ultimately it's all about having data. The running order for today is we begin by I'll give a short update on how the data value hub helps businesses. We then have our first speaker, who would be Niall Fitzmaurice, who's business group leader at Microsoft. Why automation matters. Trevor from EVROS, where he's the applications development director, will speak about intelligent process automation and what's the essence of robotic process automation itself. Ruth from NightingaleHQ will then speak about automation and the whole concept of developer velocity. Ruth is the product director at Nightingale. Nathan, who's head of intelligent automation at Kainos, will then speak about another perspective about how to get started with automation. So we'll then have a panel discussion, and then I will close by mentioning how you can engage with the Data Value Hub. So to get started, I will just say a few words about the hub, and then we'll hand over to Niall. So the hub is here to help your enterprise compete. We do this in 3 ways. We help with upskilling, with projects, and readiness assessments. The backdrop to everything that we're doing is all about Industry 4.0. So Industry 4.0 is a term that was coined about 10 years ago in Germany, at a time when Germany was facing very stiff competition from Southeast Asia. People in Southeast Asia might work for $1 an hour. Bavaria is the richest region of Europe. So BMW in Bavaria, in order to compete, had to reframe the question. They can't compete on labor cost, but they certainly can compete when they reframe the question and look at their overall enterprise. So in the BMW car factory, the robot reorders the paint in 2.2 milliseconds. No procurement department, no invoice, no receipt, no delivery docket, no checks cut. And a million decisions like that are made a day to drive efficiency. So when we talk about the 4th industrial revolution, it's building on earlier layers of industrialization. What's different about this now in 2021, 10 years on, what's different is that the technology that's available is much more reliable, much cheaper, much more user-friendly than ever before. So all of the great technology that German car factories put in a decade ago is now more accessible to enterprises of a much smaller size in our Northeast region here in Ireland. One of the technologies that we're going to focus in on in our conversation is all about robotic process automation. But this is something that requires a new mindset. It's a mindset that says data is the new currency and data value is the new objective. So businesses that inherently get that point are the ones that succeed when we talk about robotic process automation and Industry 4.0 more broadly. One thing that businesses do when they start down this road is they look at their process map. So they say, okay, A to Z, how do we do what we do? And there are a number of different methods, different frameworks available to do that. But once the processes are mapped, it's then possible to map the data flows shown here in the black arrows. So when we talk about supply chain management or Lean Sigma, or generally talk about digitization, at its heart is mapping processes. And we'll touch on that. The speakers are going to touch on that all the way along this afternoon. The benefits, if a business successfully implements these concepts, they end up with a happier customer, a better product, a safer workplace, better supply chain management. But this is a journey. This isn't something that's done immediately overnight. This is a journey of change, not only in technology, but in process and also in culture. And on the topic of culture, some businesses might say, well, you know what, that's not for us. We don't want digitization. We don't want Industry 4.0. And that's fine. Some businesses might say that, but that would suggest then they're managing by gut feel. And as a consequence of not managing with data, they then possess what we call the hidden factory. Now, the hidden factory is where you have, all the costs of rework, scrap, and delay are not being, measured, and they don't appear on the balance sheet. But the enterprise is carrying the cost of all those wasteful things. And so when we look at robotic process automation, it's one of the great technologies that can help with addressing some of these hidden factor ideas. But this is a move towards managing with data. Now, the other thing that you have to assume in whatever business you're in, you have to assume that your competitor is already doing this. So I'll move on now to our first speaker, Niall Fitzmaurice from Microsoft. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing and allow you to share your screen. So you should have the rights to share now.
Yeah, perfect. Give me 1 second. You see that okay?
Yes, looking good.
Yeah, no, listen, thanks a million, John. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Niall Fitzmaurice, and I'm the Business Applications Lead here in Microsoft Ireland. And what business applications in Microsoft covers is everything from customer relationship management, CRM, to ERP, finance and logistics and manufacturing, etc., right through to some of the newer technologies that John was saying there around things like low code, which is a new concept, a newish concept in the industry, and intelligent automation as well that John touched on with this robotic process automation. That's the area I'll speak about today. So our specific service, if you like, or product is in the automation space is a thing called Power Automate, and that's part of a platform called Power Platform. So I think, before we look at product or anything like that, what I really wanted to talk to you about was, why does automation matter, and why does it matter now? We all know that businesses face day in, day out pressure from every angle to become more productive and efficient, and I would say, John spoke about the context of Industry 4.0. So that's, that this data as currency and this value from data is an additional pressure that we're seeing across industries. But we all know that time and resources are really finite, and there's only so much that someone, a single person or a team in an organization can do in any one day. And really what we see is the best organizations are really powered by strategic and creative people. The best organizations have this sense of vision that permeates the whole organization, right from top to bottom, left to right. But even what we really see day in, day out is that the pressures of modern business and the pressures of the modern business world, that means that probably your smart, creative people spend a good deal of their day, John, called it out as a waste, to use the lean term, but like they spend their day in a lot of not strategic and less creative, repetitive, mundane activities. like answering repetitive emails, or sifting through documents, or building spreadsheets, or sharing spreadsheets, or punching data into a form or a system. So we really have that, are people doing the strategic and creative and innovative things to really push businesses forward. And if we layer on some of the workplace challenges we're seeing at the moment, remote working is great, but it does bring some challenges with it in terms of, disparate systems of working, because everyone is remote, or large portions of the team are remote, or your suppliers are remote, or your customers are remote. So that can drive less standardization across process, less visibility into the processes, and more need for information sharing. And then obviously, we have this continuous pressure to be more productive, more efficient in what we do day to day. But the reality, I think, today is many people are just too busy even to take the time to stand back to think about how they're going to be more productive. And things really aren't slowing down. The customer demands are just getting higher and more urgent. They're not going away. Customer expectations, the customer expectation around customer experience is just growing and enhancing every year. So when we in Microsoft think about automation, we often think about what are the opportunities that you can drive from automation in terms of digitizing more on your workforce, or driving business benefit by completing mundane tasks, or automating repetitive tasks, and ultimately freeing people up to think more strategically, to be more innovative and drive more innovative work with their human creativity. So what I'd encourage you to do is, John touched on it as well, the technology has really made huge leaps and bounds, especially in the last few years. So think about what you do and what your organization does in terms of, if your workforce had more time to innovate, what would you do with that? What would you innovate on? If your workforce was a lot more productive due to automation, what would you do? You'd free up this productivity. What would you do with that productivity? If you had faster time to insights in your business, or if you take it a step further, and again, touching on this idea as data as currency and data as a value, where it's really shifting is to proactive business processes. And that's the shift we'll see over the coming years. But what would you do if your business was more proactive? What new business capabilities could you build? What new investments could you pitch for or make in your business? What new markets or customers could you serve if you got all this benefit from automation? And that's really the way we think about it high level. And our vision for the automation platform that we have is really started from the recognition that data is increasingly flowing from everything to everything, and a quite a strong belief that organizations that are able to harness their data to gain insights and drive truly intelligent business processes will ultimately end up outperforming those who don't. And I suppose the way we think about it is, this is really made possible by digitally connecting the assets of your business, whether they're hard assets or soft assets, human resources, etc., to really to connect your organization, to optimize your operations. That could be business process efficiency, for example. Empower your employees, give them some time back to be more innovative, to be more creative. Engage your customers in a better way. Improve that customer experience for your customers, because none of us are anything without our customers. And think about how you can use automation and these modern technology platforms to transform your products and services. Ultimately, automation, it's not a technology project. It's about driving better business outcomes for your business. Yes, part of it is implementation of technology, but what you're really trying to do, we believe, is freeing up your workforce to be more strategic, creative, and drive innovation in your business. So I think, really high level, we tend to think of RPA within this world of automation. So, hang on a sec, right? What is RPA? What is this term that we're seeing? So, there is many different ways to look at this, and there's nuances to it, and I'm sure some of the other speakers will take it through, what they see and the projects and the implementations and the customers and the use cases that they come across. But one definition is robotic process automation, mimics user interactions on screens. So it effectively does the job of a user or a human, right? And the simple way I try and think about robotic process automation, or RPA, is it's allowing or enabling a so-called software robot to take on mundane or repetitive tasks in place of the human that would normally do it. So what does that mean, right? So it's an example I often use is, so let's say your business enters 50 purchase orders a day into your ERP system, 5 days a week, whatever it is, 50 weeks of the year, right? And instead of having, an operator or a user do that, it's getting the robot to do that. And then, back to this idea as data as value, data as currency. If you can input the right data into that automation, you will automate that process, freeing up that part of your organization, maybe to do something else, maybe to implement a new process, maybe to drive in to a new market. And then really, what in terms of RPA, and in terms of the wider thought about automation, the way we think about it in Microsoft is we offer and think about automation by bringing several core capabilities together into one platform. So our view is that there's no single type of automation that should be considered an island. So we would view RPA as a type of automation within an intelligent automation suite or intelligent automation platform in our case. And really the reason we think about it that way is because there's your processes, or what you're trying to automate in your business, can often benefit from many different ways of automating, one of which is RPA. So, within this suite, RPA, as I said, think of it as the robot punching in the PO on your ERP system, for example, or doing any automation of a screen-based entry type situation. But you can also leverage things like AI for automation. So this could be reading in document processing. I think some of the other speakers might mention this. Invoice processing is a very hot topic in this area at the moment. But I was trying to think of another example, and there's this really good example around a company. They manage industrial assets, and what they do is they use AI. So this is the visual side of AI. They use AI to capture invasive plant species, and what they do is they send up a drone. The drone takes a picture of the invasive plant species, and then the AI tells them, do they need to cut back the plant? What type of plant is it? Is it noxious? And that kicks off an automated workflow. So previously, they would have went out and just, surveyed the asset every, whatever it was, 6, 9, 12 months. But now the AI is really helping them focus on the automation of that process and really focusing in on where they might have a challenge. DPA is digital process automation. So often with more modern systems, you can create a digital wire between the two systems to drive the automation. So an example there might be, connecting SurveyMonkey. Maybe you're surveying your customers about something, and then you want to build a connection straight into your CRM system. And that, in my case, for Microsoft, that could be Dynamics 365 Sales, but it could be something like Salesforce. And then maybe you want to create another automation into another system, like a modern version of SAP, for example, and you could connect it there with digital process automation. So, might need to go on mute there. Thanks. In terms of business process management, this is where you orchestrate digital versions of your processes, and you might use RPA and DPA to automate. And then finally, and probably one of my it's a really interesting area for me lately is process mining. So this is using technology to look at what state your processes are in. John mentioned, a process first, or a business process focus here. Look at the state of your processes and then design a 2B process. Because the last thing you want to do when you're automating something is automate a bad process, right? You want to automate that optimal process. And look, lots of us are used to, a lean Six Sigma approach here, where you optimize your process first. And I think what's really interesting in the industry here is a lot of these low-code tools, or a lot of these innovation platforms are now, you're able to turn that 2B vision of your process, very quickly execute on it and build it in technology. So, who can automate? Who is this pointed at? From a Microsoft perspective, we've chosen this word democratization. Apologies for the American spelling, but and we've chosen this word very carefully because we've designed it for all users. That's our approach to it. So in terms of citizen developer, what that really means is a classic business user, or savvy, technology savvy business user who can actually go and automate their own processes without the need for professional developers or IT. That's not to say though this isn't for professional developers. It's another tool in the toolkit for them. And of course, on the IT administration side, that's really important because lots of organizations want to make sure the automations are governed correctly, etc. But I really love this idea around the democratization of it. So pushing out the innovation tooling, so enabling people to actually build and execute on the innovations, and enabling the people who are closest to source. Go find the people in your organizations who are, who the innovators are. Maybe this is a tool. These are tools you can put in their hands now to improve, their day-to-day and the processes that they manage and control. What's the scale of this? There's hundreds of thousands of organizations globally using this, supporting millions of processes. I keep referring to this term platform. It is a global platform that you can leverage. A little bit on the, I suppose, on the why. So what, right? It's just another technology hitting me, right? Why should I care about this? What we do a lot of work, and our partners as well do a lot of work with customers on, is to build the business case for automation. And I think the beauty of the technology lately is that you can actually run a proof of concept with the technology really, really quickly. So you can pick a candidate process or set of processes and actually build that automation in test very, very quickly. And that can help add to your business case. So we do this a lot in helping customers quantify what's the potential business impact of automation. Typically you'll see very strong ROI. You can quantify the productivity savings. And what we see a lot of customers do, especially those in manufacturing, logistics, engineering, and service industries, is picking their key KPIs. Like here's an example of reduced errors, and then often with those key KPIs, the business can monetize them or reflect them as a direct euro benefit, pound benefit to the business. And just a note, John has all my slides and all my links, so I'm sure he'd be happy to share some of these, but it might just give you a flavor for, how do you have this conversation if it's with your board or the leadership, right, who may not care too much about the detail of the technology. We have this discussion a lot. I think, in terms of examples, to kind of turn it on a bit just before I wrap up, I picked a manufacturing one. I was talking to John and the other speakers before this. So like a simple example might be, automating notifications for shipping, right? So a customer pings you and says, where's my shipment at? Right, you can use this type of automation to quickly automate it, get the email, get the robot or the automation piece to read the email, dip into your ERP, take the shipping status, automatically craft an email and send it back. There's lots of processes that have that type of inefficiency in it. The other area might be, standardizing of manufacturing processes with automations between them. There's a good example, actually. There's a company in the Midlands called Mergon, who the citizen developer in that case, it was a chap working in quality management. So it's a manufacturing, they produce parts for cars, Tesla and BMW and stuff like that. So incredible company. But the citizen developers there improved the quality management process. Simple checklist thing, something classic that will come out of Lean or Six Sigma. But they built that on the Power Platform. The citizen developers built that, and I know the team EVROS were actually across that customer as well, helping them with their innovation. But it's those types of improvements. And there's one example I kind of wanted to talk through with you a little bit, to kind of bring it to life a little bit, which was it's the CocaCola bottling company, right? So I know this is Coca-Cola, and it's Coke is Coke, and it's absolutely massive, but I think it does have relevance for us in Ireland, especially in manufacturing, logistics type businesses. So the bottling company is a independent of Coke company, and it services parts of the US market. And within that business, what it has is it's a business. They sell these fizzy drinks dispensers, and people actually love there's a fan base for these dispensers, right? Because I think people can mix their own Coke and Fanta and Sprite, and they have their own little combos and stuff like that. So this is a subsection of that bottling business. And what they decided to do strategically was, they were making and selling these dispensers and pushing them out to restaurants and businesses, clubs, etc. And what they strategically decided to do was outsource the maintenance. Okay, so they made this strategic decision: we're going to outsource the maintenance of these things. And what they ended up with was this hodgepodge, really inefficient, nasty-looking business process, right? So, the CRM agent would take the order, and these types of processes are all over the place, right? The CRM rep takes the order, tracks it in Excel, manually creates a PO, then has to put the order into the outsourced supplier system, so then has to translate part number A into part number B, manually put it into system, check their email for delivery, blah, 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 print everything out, pick up the printout, walk to accounts payable, they scan it in, they approve it, it gets paid, etc. Right? So, they had to do this business, they had to make this they made this strategic shift really quickly for whatever reason. So they were left with this kind of hodgepodge, really inefficient process. And the business challenge for them was, they'd made this strategic decision, great, but now they're left with potentially having the cost of hiring an extra 10 agents to deal with this process. Okay, so what they actually did was they looked to automation, surprisingly enough, right? But they looked at automation here, and what they did was they automated the creation of the PO process. They automated the creation of the order into the supplier's system. They automated the interpretation of the email and reading the invoices. They automated that bit where they picked up the paper and walked to the accounts payable department. And the little boxes that you see there with, the little flows, that's when I mentioned low code earlier on. A lot of this is built, it's just simple drag and drop. And again, the theme of data, right? The data is the currency here. If your data is high quality, clean, and you can put it into the automation, then you can automate. So what they did here was they avoided the cost of hiring, it's a huge cost, right? Hiring 10 full-time customer relationship agents. And that's great. That business benefit is super. But what I really like about this is they use this technology within their existing ERP system implementation. So in Coca-Cola's bottling case, that was SAP. So they didn't need to rip that out or replace it or develop on it. They just used the automation to punch the data into it. And then it was the same with the supplier's ordering system. So that was an old legacy system. So they just used RPA to punch in the data, which was great. And then obviously the low code nature of this was all done super quickly. This isn't, some highly specialized team doing this. It's a few people, right, with the citizen developers as well, doing it. And I think from listening to the team, something just stuck in my head from what they said was, what they said to me was, if you're thinking about automation and thinking about where you start, right, a great place to start is if you have a process involving paper where you have to pick up or walk around with that paper, you should automate that process. And now in the bottling company, they're walking around now looking for those types of processes to automate. But I just thought it was a really nice example, because this is definitely something that's doable in all sides of manufacturing, logistics, service, maintenance, engineering type businesses that we have here in Ireland. Just as I go to close with you this afternoon, I just want to talk a little bit about how to get started. I know some of the other speakers will give you some more ideas here and flavors of how to get started. But for us in Microsoft Ireland here, we have our Power Platform training days. So please come. John will have all the links. We put them on periodically. You just join virtually, totally free. It can bring you through more examples of how you could use it in your business, etc. It's a great way to get started. Another one, and it was funny, because just as we were, as speakers do, we gather just before these calls start, right? And we were chewing the fat a bit. If you're a Windows 10 user or you're a Microsoft Office user, you're probably already technically on the platform. So you may actually have you may actually already have the ability to use some of this technology. So just recently we announced with Windows 10 users at no additional cost, you can download our desktop RPA tool. And then with Office, if you're an Office 365 user, there's a lot of Power Platform functionality comes. So I'd encourage you, just try it, do it. We often talk about this in Power Platform land. Just do it. Get started, build a proof of concept. I'd also say a big shout out to our partners. A couple of them, and I know them, are on the call. I'm going to be speaking to you later. Our partners are a great source to get started as well. John and the Data Value Hub, the folks that are on the call, these guys can really go out and help you get started, whatever way it is, a proof of concept, something more complex, whatever you need, our partners will be there to help you. And then just finally, with technology these days, it's actually amazing when you look at what the communities can do for each other. So in Microsoft in Ireland, for example, we have a Power Platform user group, a community group in both out of Belfast and out of the Republic of Ireland, because the Microsoft Ireland subsidiary covers the island of Ireland. But the community is an absolutely amazing source for you. What happens with the community is it's a bunch of really passionate people who share stuff. So not only in Ireland, but globally. So whether that's, the community with blogs or with tutorials or videos, there's tons of stuff. And normally, if you look at what process I need to fix, someone's already done it, or there's somebody in the community that can help you answer the question. So I wanted to give a really big plug to the community, because most of these people, they just do it because they're passionate. They're passionate about automation, or they're passionate about technology and improving business processes. So most of those sessions, etc., are totally free as well. But it's a great resource, especially when you're getting started. So look, you've listened to me for 25 plus minutes. I'll leave it there before I hand you over to Trevor in EVROS. But please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to hear what you're thinking about, or what you're using the technology for to improve your businesses. So without any further ado, I'd hand you back over to Trevor from EVROS, who's going to bring you through some more interesting areas of RPA.
Thanks, Niall. Just before I bring across to Trevor, thank you very much for that insightful walkthrough of why automation matters, Niall. It's fascinating, the examples you picked. The CocaCola example is incredible. As you said, wherever there's paper, there's an opportunity to automate and save time, save overheads of all kinds, and improve accuracy and delight the customer. And it's fascinating how you've also pointed out about the online training. and the community and how much of this can be achieved for free. So if someone has Windows 10, Office 365, they have free access to that particular entry point into this concept. Thank you, Niall. So our next speaker is Trevor, and Trevor's going to speak about intelligent process automation and what is RPA. So I will stop sharing my screen, Trevor, and I'll hand over to you. You're okay to go?
Yeah, I think I'm okay to go. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, one sec. Yes, can see your screen. Thank you.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, listen, thanks so much, John, and thanks very much, Niall. I think there's going to be a fair amount of crossover between each of the speakers as we go through today, and hope you get some value. I have a load of slides. I'm going to try and move nice and quickly through them. I'm going to try and talk at a high level what is intelligent process automation, and then provide a practical example of what we've done internally. And actually, to Niall's point, it's around an invoicing purchase order process. And I'll just show you a practical approach as to how we do that. And also I'll talk a little bit about some of the other automation projects that we're currently looking at. So EVROS, we're an Irish company. We're up to over 500 employees. And earlier this year, we merged with Air Business. So that was a big partnership. So we're probably the biggest now technology player in the market with a suite of services. And principally, we came from a managed service background. So we deal a lot with government agencies and large corporates, but we've a range of sizes and industries that we service as a business. I suppose when I go out and talk to people about digital transformation, because digital transformation, I suppose, means so many different things to different people. But as they try and digitize their business and they try and move that forward, I suppose the biggest issue is around that data governance, and in particularly sort of accessing legacy systems. And I think I was reading that legacy systems are probably the number one killer for digital transformation projects. And the next is, in support of digital transformation, I suppose digital process transformation and automation is the next big thing. How do we remove, as Niall was saying, how do we remove those manual repetitive tasks and sort of refocus staff onto more value add activities? And the last one then is, of course, with COVID, is the acceleration of working from home. So how do we allow staff to interact with business processes remotely, and then also monitor what people are doing as part of those processes? And I suppose I worked for 10 years for Land Pharmaceuticals. I spent a lot of time down at Athlone in our manufacturing facilities there. And I saw it myself, where you have these core systems like SAP or Documentum, etc. And then you had business processes that could be managed in those core systems. But of course, once those processes moved outside of those core systems, it was very hard to track and monitor. And often you'd see Excel spreadsheets sort of spinning up and becoming part of a process, or bottlenecks in email, and people not being able to reply or approve things were a real challenge. So we're seeing this emergence and need of another layer that sits across all of these. And also, how do we extract information from legacy systems? So the trends, I suppose, that we're seeing around automation is particularly now AI and machine learning. So we're moving beyond just task automation, and we're starting to layer in this new phenomenon of AI. And we probably all used Netflix and Amazon, in early 2000s. And we were blown away by the fact how these things started to realize what we wanted to buy. And sometimes they were accurate, and sometimes they weren't so accurate if you were buying for other members of the family. But it was really basically looking at trends of what your buying patterns were, and perhaps what might be of interest to you going forward, or what movies you might like to watch. And as we've learned from those retail experiences, that's now starting to come into the workplace. And you can see across the bottom there, all the leading consultancy firms are saying, look, automation and AI, it's gathering pace, it's coming into the marketplace, it's improving productivity, it's looking at cost savings, and ultimately it's driving innovation. So as Niall was saying, well, what is RPA? Well, in simplistic terms, it's the technology that enables the software to emulate and integrate actions typically performed as a human, and interacting with systems in a sequential way, and then obviously being able to do it without any human interaction. And that's where the acronym RPA came from. And really what you're looking for, and I think Nathan's going to touch on this later, is you're looking for processes that are very manual, that are repetitive. So they have a sequence, and you generally want something that's at volume, clear rules. Automation, it doesn't, as you all probably know on the call, it doesn't like exceptions. There must be clear rules around it, and you have to have an electronic sort of input or interface into these systems. So what's it good at? Well, typically, and again, if you think about it, the software is really trying to mimic human interaction. So if you've got an activity where you're capturing or extracting information, or you're moving information from one thing to the other, or you're creating triggers as part of a process, it's really good. And I also find that in an ideal world, if you have two systems, if you could have a deeper API handshake, great. But if you have a legacy system and a new cloud service, how do you get those two things to talk? Well, I find RPA very good as that glue in between the middle, and it can get you, it can get those task elements. You can automate it and still work on your digital transformation journey. And then what you're starting to see, as I said, is this task automation in the middle of moving and copying and pasting. And then you have the emergence of AI. And really, when you add in AI, you start to get a more knowledge intensive type work, where, say, for example, you can get the AI to search for structured and unstructured data to look for, say, patterns or an algorithm within the data, and then pull that information back as part of your automation. So you're starting to see that emergence. There's another thing I suppose another concept to be aware of is business process management, or BPM. And it's a methodology that allows you to orchestrate your data, your users, your systems, etc., in end-to-end processes. So it allows you to design your workflows and then automate your processes. It's like building a house. First you need the foundations, then you need the walls, etc., as you build up your relationships, etc., as part of that. And BPM is really good for building out and simulating more complex business processes that have multiple steps, where you're coordinating not just your automated elements, but maybe human decision points, etc., and providing a governance layer. So RPA, good at task automation, or maybe some broader type, and then more end-to-end. BPM is really that layer that sits above it. And then the final sort of piece that's in play is your AI and your machine learning. So AI simulates human intelligence and behavior, and it tends to be pre-programmed. Machine learning uses algorithms to identify patterns, as I said earlier, in data, which is then used to create data models which can make predictions. And like any learning, they improve over time. So the more information you pump into these things, the more accurate they get over time. And I'm gonna give you a practical example of that in a minute. So what does AI and machine learning good at? Well, the guys, I think we're talking, Niall was talking about the drones taking pictures and then looking for patterns and then making judgments on that. So anything to do with images, facial recognition, or pictures, spotting patterns, or filtering or transforming information, classifying or extracting, and highlighting. So all very powerful stuff when done correctly. And the likes of Microsoft are offering these services, or Amazon and Google, etc. They're offering these services, and we've done some stuff on cognitive services, where again you're looking at keyword analysis and keyword matching. they're offering it as a black sort of box service. So you as a consumer, whether a small or medium sized or large business, you don't need to go in and have to configure these elements. They're there off the shelf. You can buy into them through your subscription or your Azure configuration, and you can plug them into your solution. So they're pre-built, yeah. And the benefit of this is that, you know, Microsoft are giving their customers tools to try and make them more innovative and to drive innovation and make them more competitive. And on the flip side, they're ultimately driving consumption for Azure. So that's what's in it for them. They're driving consumption, and then for you, you're layering in technologies and services that you just wouldn't be able to afford otherwise. And then when you bring these things together, your RPA on your task automation, your BPM on your process management, and your AI and machine learning, you get this buzzword of intelligent process automation. And really that's where the hot topic is now. If you go to Gartner, where people are realizing that the real value and return on investment is when you combine each of these. So they've all been around for a while, but when you bring them together effectively, you know, you get a bigger bang for your buck. And I'll show you what I mean here. You have your process automation at the bottom. You start off with your RPA and your BPM, and these are typically, as part of your journey, you start off with these elements. But then when you start to layer in the machine learning and the AI as part of your solution, and it's getting more complex and more end-to-end processing, you start to get a bigger bang for your buck. So typically you start out with a 20, 30% benefit, and then you go sort of 40, 50% as you drive that out. And there's just one other point I was going to make on this. The benefit of the RPA is that I suppose these bots can work so much quicker. They can work so much more effective. They're so much better, so much quicker, and their execution is so consistent. That's really of huge benefit to organizations. So this is a quote from McKinsey I saw, talking about, look, AI and machine learning is coming. It's already here. COVID has just rapidly accelerated the deployment of these technologies. And I was on a conference call with one of the BPM suppliers that we work with. And it was really interesting to hear companies in the States that had adopted this technology, how they were able to change processes at scale. These are government agencies who will be servicing a lot of people, and they were able to change their processes at scale, securely and in a compliant manner, and also generate new processes because they had adopted this technology. And of course, the other piece was they were able to do it remotely in the middle of lockdown. And it gave them such a huge competitive advantage because they had that capability available to them. And they had, I suppose, these enterprise low-code frameworks to manage their processes, and the ability to map out and make changes to the processes without having to compile code and manage the whole code process. So moving on then to, I suppose, some of the practical examples that we've provided within EVROS. We're doing a lot of work around account deactivation, activation, deactivation, managed service, and other service elements. We're also doing an interesting project at the moment around patch management, where we're combining RPA with traditional software, where we're deploying some logic through RPA in a timely fashion. We're also doing a lot of IP checking for the security team and some of the other functions there. And then for finance, I'm just going to run you through then very quickly what we did there as a practical example to show you an approach for implementing, I suppose, automation software. So one of the challenges the finance guys had was there was one individual who's spending about 20 plus hours a week manually processing around 1,800 invoices a month. So we would raise a purchase order through Microsoft Nav, and then as the invoices came through an Outlook mailbox, an individual would have to print out the invoices from Outlook and then type that information into Microsoft Nav to approve those. So it's a very manual, time-consuming process and wouldn't allow the business to scale. So we've probably doubled every 3 years in size over the last 10 years. So as a business, we would need to put more people on that activity if we're to continue to scale at the rate we're doing. I suppose the considerations, we took the top 20 suppliers and we looked at their invoice templates, and of course they were all different. So the different file formats, different designs, and we had to look at how are we going to integrate with Outlook and how are we going to apply that. So what we did was we met up with the team, and again, most of you are probably familiar with this type of approach on the call. We mapped out the business process. So we said, okay, well, what are the steps with the business stakeholders? What are the decision points? What are the exceptions? And we mapped that out. And then what we did is we mapped out an automated process. So apologies, this is so small. There's really only two things you need to think about here. Is one, when the mail emails come in or the invoices come in, there's really two paths that the automation takes. We have an unattended bot that's continually running and looking at the mailbox at 6 o'clock in the morning and 6 o'clock in the evening and looking to extract attachments, OCR them. If the data on the invoice matches what we expect to an 80% confidence rating, then it passes it all the way through to Nav and it accepts the invoice and approves it. If it doesn't, it's pulled back through a screen to validate the exception, right? So we use that, we use an attended bot to deliver that process. So what happens if an invoice comes in and the unattended bot can't process it? Well, it's displayed to the one of the finance team like this. So you see the invoice on the right-hand side, and then you have the metadata that we're trying to extract on the left, and it gives it a confidence score down the left-hand side. So quickly, the finance people can see, well, where is it failing, or what is it not confident it's picking it up? They can go in there and then correct the information and then continue or accept that invoice and push it on through the process. So this is what the process looks like. Or from a technical solution perspective, this is the data model. So here we took the top 20 supplier invoices and we built a data model. So in other words, we taught the software where to look for each supplier, and then we uploaded that into the cloud service. So when the bots run, the unattended bot here on the right, it will use AI and the data, AI and machine learning and the data model, and it will pick up the attachment out of Outlook. It will go, okay, that's a statement, don't want that. This is something else, don't want that. This is an invoice, great. Which supplier is it from? It's supplier A. Where do I find the metadata? Here, here, and here. 80% scoring on all that metadata, brilliant. Off you go to Microsoft Nav and off we go. If we're not happy, it goes to the finance team, it's queued. They cross-check it, they validate it, and the cool bit is, and this is again where the AI comes in, is it updates the data model. So we train it up, we set it up, and then really the finance function then becomes self-sufficient. It's updating and managing the data model and teaching it as it goes. So in theory, as we get more exceptions, the more intelligent the actual solution gets. So one of the things that we didn't kind of realize as a benefit was, until probably after the project, was that the bots also go into the mailbox and classifies the emails, and it puts it into one of these buckets or stages. because as we started to realize an invoice might get approved, mightn't get approved on a Monday, mightn't get approved on a Tuesday because procurement haven't released it for whatever reason, but it might get released on a Wednesday. So we had to put invoices into a certain bucket, and then the bots would recheck on a daily basis. So the bots are grooming the mailbox and classifying the attachments and then putting it into one of the buckets. So now when the finance team come in, they're not trawling through hundreds of emails. They know exactly what they need to do that day and where to focus their time. The other thing that we did was we start to build out some reports, right? So when we were troubleshooting and looking and seeing how the system was performing, we wrote some code to say, okay, every time the bot executes, we want to run a summary report, and then we want actually a breakdown of that automation, and then also put that into a CSV because we want to have a look and report on that. The other thing that we got the bots to do, because sometimes the bots would fail within nav, and not saying we didn't have nav expertise in the team, so we would go to finance and say, well, where is the process failing? And sometimes the finance team didn't know. So what we did was we got the bots to take a picture of the error as we worked through the finance process. So now we could troubleshoot issues as they arose, because the bots were saying, hey, it's failing here, and this is a screenshot of the screen. So then we could be more descriptive when we go back to the finance team. And that was really useful, because once again, another tip is, once you put this in, you need to expect that there's a level of sort of hypercare required as part of the rollout. So you're sort of fine tuning that the process after you've made that initial investment. Then the next thing that we did, because obviously we didn't want to just look at the automations on a daily basis and how successful or unsuccessful they were. We wanted to look holistically over time, because as I said, sometimes the invoices might go through on a Wednesday rather than a Monday. So we built a SQL database, and we put a Power BI dashboard on top of that, and we start to look at trends over time. And then we started to say, okay, well, can we see how many invoices by supplier are hitting that confidence score ratio? So here you'll see if all of the metadata from each invoice is getting an 80% score above, it'll take this line here. But you can see some of these are dropping below that 80%. So why might that happen? Well, as you can imagine, we were making really good progress up until Christmas, but then of course Brexit came along, different methods of paying VAT, and the scores all started to drop down because the suppliers started changing their invoice templates that were being OCR'd. So the benefit here is we were able to proactively spot that when the documents were failing, and then go in and update the model. And in summary, we have been increasing, I suppose, our success rate as we go. An important point to point out here is that one of the things we identified during the process is that about 10–15% of our 1,800 invoices a month are what they call part invoicing. So in other words, if we raised a PO for 10 grand, it's great if you get an invoice for 10 grand because you can match the totals. But one of the issues we had is that some of our suppliers might invoice us 2 grand in January, 2 grand in February, 2 grand in March, and so on. So therefore, you'd need a more sophisticated solution to really do that level of cross-checking by line item within the invoice. So really, we just said, okay, we're going to stick to the low-hanging fruit. We're just going to go for what we can get. So that what is 30-odd% contains 15% of our part invoicing. So we're well above 85% on our success rate. Yeah, so I talked a little bit at the logging, some lessons learned. I talked a little bit at the part invoicing around that. So get your logging and auditing in early, and pick your low-hanging fruit. And I would also say, what we've learned is, if you look at, don't start off with your most complex process. If you're looking to automate, pick some of the simple ones early. I think, as Niall said, 365 is a good learning base to build up your skills in that space. And also then, if you do have a bigger process, maybe break it down into chunks, right? So take, if it's got 10 steps, maybe look at the ones you can easily automate first, and then build that out. Don't try and take the whole process on as one go. Well, look, you can, and we tried to do it, but it didn't go well. We were much better off taking parts and building it out that way. So ultimately, we're saving around 80% time saving for that task. We've got a solution that can scale, and ultimately a happy finance team. There's loads of processes you can look at across your business. Obviously we were looking at the finance. We feel that there's kind of low hanging fruit there. And the next thing we were looking at is our movers, joiners, leavers process. But again, there's many other areas that you can look at. We used a BPM tool for our joiners, movers, leavers process that allows us to, first of all, build out and define the process. Then we can build our data models within that tool, and then we can build up our forms and then deploy and manage the process. And at a high level, it means that a new employee comes on board, it fills out a form. That form then goes to HR for approval. We then issue through our BPM tool, we then issue the documents through DocuSign. Then when that's approved, we have bots that then go off and set up the users within Active Directory and other systems that may be required as part of that. Once finance approve the next step, the bots go off and purchase hardware from our eSource, which is our platform, and then it goes back into our BPM tool, and employee training and compliance records are issued for that individual, and that sits above our HR system. So we're combining multiple steps here. We're getting bots to execute where we can, and then we have, I suppose, human interaction like the managers or HR approving the process as they go. I know Nathan's going to cover that. Yeah, this is just how we identify good processes, and I get back to that original concept. And again, Nathan, I think, is going to start or talk about where to start, but also how you might do. Well, for us, might do a scenario build, or you might call that a proof of concept. So again, we have stages around that. So ultimately, I'd say legacy systems don't need to be an issue for you, right? So if you do have old systems and you're thinking, gosh, I can't automate that, these tools that are emerging in the marketplace can help you get that information out, and can then help deliver that user experience that employees and customers want. And you can also combine legacy or old data sources which are difficult to manage or extract, and you can use cloud services. You can merge that information into your experience. It's getting much more affordable. I'm not saying it's cheap. Certainly 365 is a good starting point for you, and they have a pile of stuff in there that you, as Niall said, you could already be licensed for and have the ability to use. And then as you get more sophisticated or at more of an enterprise, there are probably more robust and rigorous tools that you could consider. And again, all of that's becoming more affordable. And then I think, as Niall said, I suppose I have to give EVROS a bit of a plug. Pick a partner that can support you correctly and give you the right information as you go through that transformation. So, John, that's double barrels there. I'm not sure how quickly I sort of scooted through those slides, but hopefully I gave people a bit of an overview around some of the acronyms and terminology and some of the things we're seeing, and then some practical advice around how we've implemented these technologies at EVROS and how you might move some of your projects forward.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Trevor. And it was great to hear about your internal experience. So EVROS using this technology internally, as you point out, in your finance department. It's a fascinating insight. Thank you, Trevor. Our next speaker is Ruth. And Ruth, I will hand over sharing to you also. You ready to go? I think Ruth might be on mute.
Otherwise, I'll have to keep talking, John.
Yeah, we can't have that, Trevor.
No.
Thank you.
You saved me. You saved me.
I'll hand over to you now, Ruth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks, John. I'll just put up some slides here. That was a really comprehensive example that you shared there. I enjoyed it a lot. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ruth Kearney, and I'm the product director of a company called NightingaleHQ. Just a small piece of trivia before we start. Everyone knows Florence Nightingale as a fantastic nurse who really paved the way for nursing, but a lot of people don't know her for her data science skills. So she was one of the world's first data scientists, and that she is our namesake here. So what we do, we've developed a platform called Go Smarter. It's a no-code AI-powered platform that allows anyone in an organization to use tools, to deploy them, and to automate manual tasks around them so that they can ultimately get on with a lot more productive, high-value work. And actually, this is really, really important because we hire professionals and executives to work across departments. They are closest to the processes. They know them best. They know where they don't work, and they know where they're most manual as well. So what we're particularly interested in is bringing these into the fold along with the IT team, and adopting and deploying these tools for, again, the low-hanging fruit, the quick fixes, fixing stuff that's going to help gain momentum in an organization with automation, and also bring an ROI fast as well. I should say we're a small team. Our backgrounds and our area of specialty is in AI, it's in data science, and it's in software development. So just to have a look, we are mostly focused on working with manufacturers.
Ruth, you want to share your slides?
Sorry, excuse me. Sorry, I thought they were shared.
No problem.
Sorry about that. Are we there?
You can see your slides.
Can you see?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, great. Okay, so looking at ways that, let me just hide this view. Okay, so looking at ways that AI-powered automation can work, and our main customers are in manufacturing and supply chain. We are most interested in topics and in running proof of concepts and projects in predictive maintenance and process automation. But we're also very keenly interested in the low-code stuff as well, around what we're talking about today, RPA, and all of the low-code, no-code tools that go with that. We're Microsoft partners, so it's definitely our bag to really leverage and help people get more out of everything from Microsoft 365 to the Power Automate suite, right up to their cognitive capability services as well. So it's looking at the AI under the hood that are going to take conventional RPA and really skyrocket it, because you're adding on some pretty good smarts or AI under the hood, that and that's what we're doing. And I'm going to bring you through an example of that with customers that we have today. But before we get there, I want to introduce this concept of developer velocity. We've just finished a three-part series on what this is with Quest Software, and it is keenly linked to this idea of tooling. So we talk about low code, no code tooling, and what does that mean, and how can it bring value to an organization? And this is the area that we're interested in. So if I can quickly keep your attention for the frame before I get into the use cases, that I think it'll be very beneficial. So we look at developer velocity. It's the ability to drive transformative business performance through software development. And I know there's people listening who are turning off right now and saying, that's not me. We don't develop software. We're not in the software game. But actually, I'd urge you to keep an open mind, because technology and software help us run our businesses. They help us make our products and our services. They help us sell, market. They are intangibly involved in everything we do in business. So, so this idea of developer velocity was studied in a really great piece by McKinsey. They studied 400 large enterprise firms around this, right? And the idea is, how do we increase our developer velocity, and what does it actually do for business performance, and what does tooling have to do, more importantly, and RPA? So they found out that in this study that the top performers are the ones that the top performers in developer velocity are the ones that are performing stronger financially. But one of the key aspects in this was how they provided their teams, both their software teams and their organizations, with best in class tooling. And you can see here, stronger financially, but also have stronger tools. They're more innovative, they're spending less time testing, and they have higher retention of staff as well, development staff. I think this is important, and it's an important point also in a post-COVID and a world when we've seen this surgence and acceleration with collaboration tools, with video conferencing tools, with remote work tools as well. So the idea of developer velocity and tooling comes to the forefront. And we're seeing it a lot with organizations. How are they supporting the selection of tools, whether you're outsourcing your IT function, whether you've got a small IT function, but that selection of tools is critical to business performance, okay? It's also very highly correlated with innovation, and the top performers in this were 55% higher on innovation than the bottom quartile companies. So what are the main areas that are critical to focus on? People, tools, and processes. And I don't have time to go through each one of these today. I wanted to specifically focus in on the tools aspect of this and the low code and no code ones. So we'll focus on that. So we look at the tools that you should provide your software developers with. They are a vast range, and Niall would have touched off some of these as well, ranging from the Power Platform, and also cognitive services, and the many tools that Microsoft are rolling out in both for your non-technical people or your citizen developers, right up to very, very comprehensive pre-built models and sandboxes and virtual machines where your developers can get stuck in and use some very sophisticated AI and machine learning as well. So by arming our people with this, we will have better business outcomes. And we work with organizations, you know, at all sides of the spectrum. So lower developer velocity, where their major concern is moving to the cloud. Maybe they're very concerned with agile and lean practices, right up to the higher developer velocity spectrum as well, where they're engaging in open source, and not just open source in terms of using it in their code, but building this community of open source philosophy throughout their companies as well. So framing that the way it is, just another pitch really around the importance of best-in-class tools. You can see here the relative importance to overall business performance indicators and how tools, especially in planning, collaboration and development, far outweigh those in other areas. So that, and I'll share these slides as well, and the white paper that this comes from, that really demonstrates to us that the tools that we use are critical to the business performance. And also, I've mentioned here before that they're really important in terms of staff retention. If we think about staff retention and software development, it's one of the fastest growing job roles now in retail, and in areas outside of technology, it is exploding. So keeping our developer capabilities happy also and satisfied by supplying them with the best tools and the ability to experiment, and also that's that psychological safety to do better for the organization through a little bit of risk as well is truly important. So what we do and work with a lot of organizations around is their tooling strategy. And again, for today, what I want to focus on is leveraging low code and no code tools. There has been this amazing democratization of a lot of digital and AI tools. Microsoft are definitely on the forefront of this as well to allow us to do this. What we have done with Microsoft tools is we've developed Go Smarter. It takes it one step further in that when you get, we have a bunch of tools which I'll show you here on this light MVP that we've launched. We've done the small little bit of black box development or configuration so that people can log on to Go Smarter and go in and start setting up their tools after going through a number of steps. Okay, and there's an RPA tool in there, there's FAQ chatbots, there's invoice processing tool that we've talked about before, and then there are more sophisticated tools like supplier management. So Microsoft have just launched in public preview right now a manufacturer accelerator tool which allows you to digitalize the steps in onboarding new suppliers. And these are things that we are all looking into now and looking for manufacturers to say, yeah, we want to check some of these out as well. It brings me to our first use case for RPA, and it's a customer of ours called Freight Logistics Solutions, FLS. They're a digital freight forwarding company and they operate throughout Europe. COVID and the pandemic have accelerated their business, and then Brexit came along and gave them a pretty hard time as well. So they've been through the mills. But what they wanted to do was they want to grow the company, they want to scale the company, but major inefficiencies, including not being on the cloud, were stopping them from doing this. So they engaged us in what our first project was. Within 2 weeks, believe it or not, in a very intense sprint, we managed to get them on the cloud. And that opened the gates really to the adoption of tools, right? No code, low code tools. So we've deployed tools around their delivery tracking system, given them more comprehensive data reporting skills, and taken a look into their automating their sales booking automation through RPA. Huge results, just the results here, the 50% staff time and the cost saving refer to their move and transition to the cloud within 2 weeks. So it's pretty demanding time. This is our framework that we loosely work with towards any type of project, but also lots of automation projects. What's the demand? We've gone through some of this before. So what's the demand? What are the goals? How are we going to get there? And ultimately what we want to do is get to the prototype stage and the iterate stage, add more data and get things up and running quickly. So this, in the case, this framework in the case of FLS, you can see here, involved, you know, the tools that were involved in it. And once we did this move to the cloud, it opened up lots of low-hanging fruit and stuff that they needed to automate quickly. These were the major pain points that they knew, and it was quite clear that they needed to get sorted. So they had a completely manual process around order confirmations. They had an actual human connect to third-party portal system to check these bookings. And so the team would have to go in, log on, see if there was an update, and then they would have to manually input very standard data relating to the order into an email and send that email. So as you can imagine, it was based on this individual having to do that piece of work. So what did we do? So our information and our software architect had a look at the system. We set up some very straightforward workflows, and we automated the booking confirmation system with them. The first robot we created was to connect the third-party systems, their systems, and monitor the bookings, train the data, and then we were able to manage the data and identify patterns with it over time. The second robot was really around to inform customers to take that second step about automatically emailing the confirmation to the end customer. And this is where it really gets interesting, because conventional RPA automates standards and easily repetitive tasks quite easily, but it's based on highly structured data. And what we had with FLS was unstructured or semi-structured data. So what we wanted to do, and that poses a lot more difficult problems, but what we want to do then is use our AI capabilities in order to be able to take that one step further. So the next step on this, which is currently happening, is that we'll use some NLP, some natural language processing capabilities to look at the unstructured data in those customer emails, and to really start automating how the interaction happens with that end customer. So that's an example of RPA and what we're doing right now, and it's RPA plus cognitive capabilities, I would say, as well. So we've got them set up on this particular pain point, got them set up real-time data, very important for them, so that their client services can use this on demand. They've much happier customers, faster, obviously less errors as well, and their staff are freed up to do other work. And bottom line here was there was huge cost saving in terms of both monetary and time saving. Second example I want to share with you, and it's less on RPA but more on process automation. This is a new customer who are high-performing technology manufacturer with applications in defense and medical space. They deliver excellence in what they do and what they produce. And they want to emulate this excellence in their product around their operations. So there are inefficiencies in their throughout their operations. And I would say, as they're dealing with any new customers, there's always elements of getting to know each other and trusting each other. So what's been referred to before about going after the low-hanging fruit and the easy stuff first makes a lot of sense. So for this, it's very simply tools around low-code, no-code tools around time management, so tracking the performance of their managers and technicians across the company, creating a simple dashboard to allow that so that it can be seen visually, and also we deployed a little supplier management tool for quote and order automation, which was a manual tool, a manual up to that point. I think what's really interesting for us here is that we often speak with operations managers who understand how the company works from department to department. So here we we started off that conversation with the operations manager, who brought in the IT team, small team of 2 or 3 people. And then we are starting to quickly move to other departments. So working with the supply chain manager as well. And there are tons and tons of stuff to be automated for sure. But the people aspect of this is always really interesting. So you're meeting people who are excellent and very competent at their jobs, and they know themselves what they want automated. They know what frustrates them every day as well. So there's a great conversation to be had between all parties in order to get the right solution and fast. So the results here, freeing up staff time and faster onboarding in the case of the quote and order automation. Finally, just to say, this is a use case less relevant to RPA, but nonetheless, just in terms of tooling, we see upskilling as a major tool. It's one of the biggest barriers and factors that is hindering companies on accelerating digitalization or their use of whatever tools that they need to use as well. In our case, it's AI tools. So we offer a lot of very, very practical training around the deployment of tools, but also around AI and what it is and demystifying it, that it doesn't have to be this big mission to transform the company, that it really can be this incremental use of no-code tools that are AI powered as well. So we had a pharma company come in for the day and wanted to work around their AI strategy and how that should align with business objectives. And again, they were from across functions. So chief of medical data, head of HR, procurement, understanding that across department is really where there are huge benefits to be had in this as well. Benefits to manufacturers, and I'm not going to list them out, but I think from our point of view, what we've seen recently with projects and tool deployments has been around this last one. Newly automated processes drive automation in other areas. So we've seen teams and business leaders get very excited about their quick wins, their fast ROI, and taking out that grunt work, and that is contagious. So once you start on this journey, and when you start small and scale up your project or your tool deployment, there's huge gains to be had. Some tips around automation and using these tools, so it's to select the right process in the first place, and that can take a little bit of time and discussion with people across different departments. To build a solid business case for it is also really important. So what's the bottom line of this? Why do we really want to do it? Is it a real pain point in the first instance? Get buy-in from senior managers in IT, which is always good, because you're going to need in a lot of cases, your IT function supporting you on that and giving administration rights. Let's say if you're using Azure functions as well. Limit the initial scope of the deployment. So in the case of invoice processing, don't go after every single invoice straight away in multiple languages. Really start small and then scale. You do not know what you will run up against as well. Select a good set and varied of data for training. And in our case with FLS, it happened to be quite unstructured data, and we had to deal with that too. So you have to plan for that as best you can, and then scale and expand. So just a little on ourselves, the implementation days and the training that we run, and we also have a very significant supplier solution network to help us as well with AI projects as they get bigger and more complex. This is our vision with Go Smarter. We are looking for manufacturers to work with us on creating new tools, to deploy tools, fast deployments, and a guaranteed ROI. If If you're interested to find out a little bit more on the concept of developer velocity and tooling, my partner, co-founder, Steph Locke, is speaking again next week on this. It's a 3-part series. I'll share the links with John. Very interesting piece of research, and she's going to talk a little bit more in depth about the tools as well. So that's it. I want to thank you for your time today. Back over to you, John.
Thank you, Ruth. That was excellent, and yeah, very clear focus on the world of accelerating development. How to get developer velocity, as you describe it. So this whole move to low code, no code, and how can developers best avail of that. So many of the organizations on the call, you know, have IT departments where, they probably in the past would have outsourced a lot of the development work, but the promise of RPA is to take some of that in-house, perhaps in certain areas, and to get a quicker result, but also to become comfortable and then to partner with experts once they understand it. So there's that very big difference in how software gets done with this technology. It's a whole different approach. And thanks, Ruth, for explaining that very clearly to us. Our next speaker is Nathan, and Nathan's topic is how to spot an automation opportunity. So Nathan, I'll hand over to you now if you're okay to share screen.
Super, yep, I'll share my screen now. Let me know when you can see that.
Yeah, we've got it.
Perfect. So thanks everyone for your time today. It's nice to meet everyone. So I'm Nathan Kearns and I head up the intelligent automation practice here at Kainos. So before I get started, a little bit about Kainos, because some people haven't heard of us, especially in the South. So we are a global organization headquartered in Belfast. We're probably about 2,200 people now globally, split across our digital services practice and our workday practice. So our digital services practice is where I sit, and that's where we really focus on digital transformation. And some of our customers are listed on the right hand side, and you know, we've had a lot of impact across the commercial sector and also a lot of work within the UK public sector as well. So we work very closely with Microsoft and Niall and his team, and also a number of other partners. So just to give you an idea of some of the scale. So when we look at my team specifically, said we're partners with Microsoft. We're also partners with UiPath and a couple of other suppliers in this RPA space. The team that I've put together has a really good mix of experience in digital transformation and software development and engineering, mixed with sort of consulting and business process improvement. And we've tried to combine those two specialisms to be able to offer those end-to-end automation solutions. So you know, we want to, you know, Kainos are an engineering company first and a software development company first, and we've tried to mix that in, and we've brought in specialists from both sides of the organization. So some of the benefits that we've seen with our customers so far in the automation journey are around, you know, accelerating their transformation. So a lot of the stuff we're doing is custom build, but actually these programs of work can be 2-3 years to be able to deploy some of these systems. And being able to use automation and RPA and various other tools, we're able to accelerate their benefits. You know, it may be a tactical solution that's taken us a month to build and it sits in place for a year and then decommissioned, but that's allowed the organization to get those benefits earlier than the 2 or 3 years that previously would have to do. It also allows customers to increase their productivity. You know, some really good examples so far. You know, the internal invoicing one and the productivity. You know, we're all busier and everything's gone digital in the last year. Using automations allowed us to be our customers be more effective, deliver more efficient workloads and processing. So these are just some of the things that we've started to see over the last couple of years with our organizations. So when we speak to a customer, they always ask, you know, where are the opportunities? And it's really, you know, we've heard some of the examples already today, but you can see on the right hand side some of the key indicators that we would look for and we would ask our customers to look for in their processes. So, you know, repetitive, you're doing the same thing every day, your team's doing the same thing every day. There's manual calculations, or there's areas where there's sensitive content movement. So your HR processes, you don't necessarily want people to see that, or payroll processes that you don't want people to have their eyes on it if they don't need to. Also, where there's areas of manual rekeying, and this is something that we have seen a massive increase in since Brexit, which isn't a huge surprise, with lots of new paperwork and customs processes put in. And we're speaking to customers now who have increased their data admin teams by 5 or 6-fold in the last couple of months, just because of the amount of paperwork that's been added. So those are the types of things we're looking for to help them transform. And on the boxes on the left-hand side, these are just some of the high-level areas that we've seen opportunities with our customers. Right through HR, finance are the obvious candidates. Supply chain, there's a huge amount of opportunity, but also within IT. And we're looking at how we can do backups, monitoring, file management, even through the batch processing overnight, and being able to identify those areas and automate where we can. So what does a deployment look like? And this is something that a lot of people have either tried and got stuck, or they don't know where to start. So we've heard some really good examples already today, but the first thing that we do is find out where this is going to help and how this can help your organization. So we would always advise having a bit of a discovery, and that'll allow you to set the scene within your organization, identifies where that low-hanging fruit is, but also where the big impact could be. And you need a business case. So you need to make sure this will pay for itself at the very minimum, or will deliver some sort of benefit. That can either be financial, it can be time saving, whatever your metric is. You need to have that in a way to be able to track and then monitor, are you delivering what value you want to deliver. So we would always say start something relatively small, 4 or 5 processes, get your way of working up, and then look and to reassess that, get your metrics in place. And when you're comfortable that you're delivering the value, then is when you look to scale. So this could either be you build out your team internally, or you work with a partner like Kainos to help build out your team, but also looking at your operating model, the people, process, technology. How are you actually going to run this and sustain this? How are you going to support this? What happens if one of the robots falls over? Who's going to turn back on? What happens if the process changes or the technology changes that you're interacting with? You need to have a thought of this stage of how do you get ready for when this is part of BAU. And then obviously you have the industrialization. This is part of your business. You want to get into a position that demand for your team is being organically generated. So you're having people come to you saying, I'm doing this process every day, or I'm running this report every day. How can I automate this? And almost like a staff ideas type idea. So that's how we try and help people. So we do have customers who are in the industrialization stage, which is great, and we're really just there to help add support to their teams, or we run a managed service for them. Or we've had customers who have done the discovery and it hasn't gone very well, or they've done a proof of concept and they don't know how to scale. And we've tried to help where we can to put in those processes to help them grow and get the benefit from automation. So what are some of the use cases that we've seen? And hopefully these are relevant to this group with some of the businesses that have been invited. So across procurement and supply chain, what actually are we seeing? So what can these processes do? So it can go in and search for info, checks quality. We have working with one of the departments in the UK that we're going off and checking invoices and actually chemicals that are being brought into the UK. We're able to go off and check that the numbers match what's on the documentation. It creates documents, it uploads documents to places. It's able to monitor internal and external portals. So if you're thinking of you're monitoring a tenders portal, this is able to track if there's anything relevant to you and brings it back. You're also able to put workflows in. So we've been able to build workflows via Microsoft Teams. So having a human in the loop effectively, where the robot needs to make a decision, and that decision is being used. A notification goes to a Teams channel, and someone's approving it via Teams. And it also allows us to check emails. So one of the customers we're working with now, we're actually using automation and Power Automate to do an email triage system. So they're getting thousands of emails a day, and we're able to use automation to read those emails, do a built-in sentiment analysis, see if they're happy or sad emails, and then prioritize them to the contact center accordingly. So they're able to go through some of the noise a wee bit and able to deliver a better service to their customers. So some of the benefits are on the bottom there, and you can see them for yourselves. It also covers the whole journey for this. So you're able to use automation in your planning stage right through to your aftermarket support. So there's a huge opportunity to automate stuff within contact centers and also within your delivery mechanisms and how you do this. So, I'll share these. I'm not going into too much detail, but there's a huge opportunity here across these. So I just want to talk about some of the examples that we've seen. So import processing. So we have a customer who's a large manufacturer, and they're expecting the workload to increase, as most people have with Brexit. So they're having this team who's grown from 10 people expected to grow to 80. So what we were able to do with them was to automate some of their declarations, automate some of their refund claims into HMRC, and able to do a lot of checks. These are people copy and paste, and they're checking stuff on portals. And what that was able to do was reduce the need to expand that team. They still need to increase it a bit because the workload increased, but being able to automate processes within their day-to-day, or actually just automate the clicking of 5 buttons, was able to free them up quite a lot. And then there's one on the right-hand side around invoice processing. So this is the common one, and the most common thing across RPA is around invoicing. So we have been working with customers where they have hundreds of thousands of invoices coming in. One in particular had 40,000 invoices a month coming in, and they had a team of people manually checking these into their system. So through the use of OCR, we had the proof of concept we actually built for these guys was done in a couple of days using the Microsoft toolset, where we were able to train the Microsoft document understanding module to read an invoice with only 5 examples. So you can do this very quickly to be able to get up to the point of being able to see if this will work for your organization. And then from that stage, you're actually able to scale up using these platforms. So that was sort of the standard processes. Within HR, there's the same opportunity as well. So right through to hire to retire processes. So we're doing this internally as well around sourcing and candidates. So Kainos get something like 40,000 applications a year. All CVs are being screened. So we're doing a very basic one to see if the CVs coming in have the keywords that are expected in that job description as a screen, and given that indication to the recruiter, does this person have some of the skills that are needed? We're also able to automatically trigger the process of getting laptops in that onboarding process. So we use Workday internally for the recruitment and the staff management, but we use different systems to manage the IT setup and the sort of account setup. So that as soon as the recruitment team hit go on the recruitment, that automatically pushes out to all the systems, creating all the tickets, and those accesses are created and the laptop is dispatched. So these, there's a huge opportunity here to either add value to your team and allow them to be more effective. For Kainos and our own way of doing this, we're trying to grow by 500 people this year. We aren't able to grow our recruitment team fast enough to deal with that. So we have added tools in to make them more effective and being able to process more applications in any given day, which is sort of taking a bit of the burden off them to deliver the growth targets the Kainos need to hit. So very similar across finance. There's a huge opportunity across AP processing, across bank reconciliations, invoice generation, which is slightly different than the invoice processing. So we're actually working with a medical outsource company who get a huge amount of referrals from the health service every year. We're talking 400,000 or 500,000 referrals a year. And every time they get a referral, that's a piece of work that needs invoiced. Currently, that process is done very manually with a team of people who create invoices. We're now sort of looking at automating their invoice or the referral management process internally into the organization, and then their invoice generation out of the organization. And again, that's just delivering pure savings of manpower needed to currently manage that, and allows them to grow and offer a better service to their customers. So when we speak to customers, they always ask about the cost of automation, and obviously doing the automation and the improvement isn't free. And how you build this into your business case is really, really important. So this is a bit of a table that we've been using just to illustrate the potential savings with the customers. So obviously year one and the development of it, you do have an upfront sort of capital expenditure for the development costs. You also will have license costs and infrastructure costs and potentially support costs, depending if you're going to do this internally. So give you an idea, maybe 50K to do a standard, relatively low complex system or automation. You will have some support costs, product support cost, depending on what tool you use. If you're using Power Automate, the numbers may be much lower because they may be free in your organization, or like the UiPath Automation Anywhere, Blue Prism, the cost will vary a bit. But once you have that in place, in theory, if nothing changes in your process and you've got that in your cost, you shouldn't need any further development. So actually, you're making savings in year one straight away. So it reduces. So as you do that, by year three, it's nearly 150,000 in net savings. And when we're looking at some of our processes, this could pay for itself within year one. And we always try to, when we're working with customers, to try and make it cover itself within a short period of time, which makes that upfront cost a wee bit less scary for a lot of people, and it makes it a bit real. Of course, this is just if you're doing, if you want actual cost savings. This could also be done in such a way that you could calculate it based on time savings for your team, or employee satisfaction or customer satisfaction as well. So there is ways of doing this, and this is what we would want to see with every process. What actually is the cost of this? What is the ongoing savings? And does this make sense to automate this process? So some of the case studies that we've done in the last couple of years, or last year really, and this one's really quite pertinent with the COVID-19 case management system. So Kainos were involved in the UK centralized case management system for contact tracing, and as part of that, we were asked to help them with the problem that they were facing and their customers were facing. So for them in the UK, all the contact tracing is tried to be done centrally. If they couldn't find a contact or a person who had tested positive or been in close contact with someone, that pushed down to the local councils. The local councils then had to do that work. So what we were finding, and what they brought the problem to us, is that the local councils had their own CRM systems, their own case management systems for every contact tracing. They were also legally obliged to update the centralized system as well, which is, as you can imagine, double entry. Straight away, they had to keep both systems up to date. So what we were able to do, working quite closely with Microsoft in the UK, was to create an automatic RPA solution that integrated from the dynamic CRM case management system on the councils and pushed that automatically into the centralized system, and then vice versa. And with some of our customers, that was saving them 7 or 8 hours a day from their teams, which resulted in them being able to handle more contact tracing. So this is something that was quite time critical. This took about 3 to 4 weeks to roll out, and was able to help organizations, and it's sitting there ready to be deployed if this needs to happen and needs to be rolled out in the case of another spike. Another one that we had was a customer had a huge backlog of direct debit mandates. So they were going to have to manually type this into their finance system. So within a couple of days, actually as part of another project that was going on, we looked at this and we were able to create a Power Automate flow that extracted all the information out of the direct debit system and put that automatically within their finance system. But what we were able to add in was actually a check to make sure the sort code and bank account details were actual real ones. So anyone who uses Monzo or Revolut will know if you try to send money to someone and it doesn't think the bank account's real, it'll kick that back out and say, that doesn't match the details. We added that validation system within this. So this allowed them to process this in minutes and get through their backlog. And they now have this solution just sitting ready to go. So next time a direct debit mandate form comes in, the process kicks off and it automatically adds the system, which just took an entire process away from their finance team. And again, a very similar process here. We're actually working with a payroll outsourcer. And this is where we built a solution using Power Platform and Power Automate, but also where we integrated with Microsoft Azure and Microsoft SharePoint as well. So what we tried to do, the issue here is the customer was getting lots of payroll information that they were providing a service for, but there was no security in place, so anyone could access the payroll files within their organization, and there was no way of moving it securely across to the right teams. So what we were able to do is create the process where these the customers uploaded this to a SharePoint site. When that was done, there was a trigger sent to another team within this customer, and they were informed that the files had been located. They then moved this to a secure SharePoint folder that only the specific team dealing with that end customer was able to use. So this is something that added a lot of comfort to the team. So it made them more productive because they got the alerts when all the information was there, but also give them the confidence that their process was secure. And lastly, I just want to touch on some of our services and what we do. So we have been helping customers across these 4 pillars. So helping them understand what their vision is for automation through developing their strategy and their operating model. Obviously, finding the opportunities, help them build that business case through the implementation of the process, either the process improvement, which you don't want to automate a bad process, through to the automation itself. And then finally, being able to help organizations where they have tried to do this and it hasn't been as effective as they wanted, help them optimize their service and their team through to training and capability enablement and support. And this is just an idea of the type of approach we take. So we try and give everyone a complexity scale, and this is the type of methodology that we would try and enable our customers to have. So that definition, design, develop, deploy, and get into a continuous improvement of using, or a continuous cycle of using these 4 Ds. And as you can see at the bottom, we try and t-shirt size all the complexities of the process, and we have a big matrix that gives you an idea, and this allows you at a very high level to be able to create a business case for the automation and see, actually, is this worth us doing? So thanks very much for the time. I just leave you with a few of these pointers. Here's some of the signs that in your organization there could be an opportunity for automation, and then within your organization, some of the questions to ask yourselves. And the key one for me is, what would you do if you had 10 times more staff? And that's the way to think of it. If you could do more, what would you do? And think of automation that way. That's me, John. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Nathan. That was excellent. And yeah, very pragmatic, this whole question of, how to spot an automation opportunity, and it's brilliant to see the approach you're recommending, looking at cost benefit analysis, looking at where there's a problem, and where to sort of where to proceed from there with rational questions guiding you to get the job done. It's excellent. Thank you, Nathan.
No problem.
The next section we have is a panel discussion. So for this part, it's Nathan with Ruth, Trevor, and myself. So Niall Fitzmaurice, who spoke at the start of our event, unfortunately had to step out this afternoon. Everybody on the call will get a video of this whole event as well, by the way. From a panel perspective, there's a couple of things. The presentations this afternoon have been excellent. We're getting to hear a lot about this concept. So the audience on our call come from many different businesses. Some of the people on the call already have an idea of what robotic process automation is, but many don't, And I suppose one question, it's been touched on several times, but probably worth asking the question nonetheless, is around, getting started. So if somebody on the call wanted to do a pilot project to pick something simple where they could maybe have a go themselves, have a look at it themselves to become more comfortable, is that something you're seeing happening widely? Is that a successful way to start the adoption on this? Maybe in terms of who'd like to answer, maybe I'll start with Trevor. Trevor, is that something you're seeing? Where somebody in a company wants to have a go themselves?
Well, yeah, I think from my own opinion is there's some organizations that are really embracing this technology and are rapidly seeing the benefits for it, and they're I suppose they're quite early adopters, and obviously from a partner perspective, you're starting to see more more partners skilling up in this area. But I still think it's relatively new. You know, we're certainly still educating most of our customers on what this is and what the capability is. And therefore, I suppose what we're seeing is the use of 365 as an initial sort of empowering of the business user as a good way to start. And as they get more sophisticated and the need grows, then you build that out. And I think Ruth made that point. It's really about educating the employees, educating the senior management, showing the opportunity, and then moving in that direction. But you know, I think it's around education, cutting your teeth on some of the more practical low-code platforms, and then building out that capability. And Ruth said it as well. You try and pick those simpler type processes to just start to understand what you're capable of, and also you know, what I was trying to say was, if you take the simpler processes and even parts of the longer processes, it just demonstrates the capability, and then you get more support within the business, you get more confident about what you're doing. The worst thing you could do is take a complex process, over engineer it, try to put in some sophisticated solution that you don't really know, you know, about it, and then that creates it just falls foul, and you don't get the support. And then to Nathan's point, I think you need to and I think Ruth was talking as well around picking the right partner to sort of help you with that journey. So that's my thoughts on it.
Yeah, thanks, Trevor. And another area is around, you know, developing the capability. And Ruth, you talked about how to develop, you know, how developer velocity can be accelerated. But what about a scenario where the IT team itself needs to go on the journey, you know, where it's coming from a cold start in this domain, where there's probably no RPA experience? How might an IT team go about that in relation to upskilling?
Yeah, it's a really important point, and actually the McKinsey piece of research talks about people, process, technology, and talks about the psychological safety factor. So giving that bit of leverage to your IT team to take risks in order to get to a successful outcome as well. So and they go deeper than that as well. They go into the well-being. Microsoft are doing a lot of research on this too, the well-being of developers, how they work, what they do. So having that psychological safety to, and that kind of freedom to do that and to experiment. One way of doing that is with these lower code, no code tools that are relatively low risk to the business and to the overall IT infrastructure of a business, right? And you've got to start somewhere, and that's a great place to start. And Trevor and Nathan and Niall have all alluded to, you know, having 365 and not utilizing it to its max. That's a good place to start too. Utilizing some of the functions that are coming out now on Teams, for example. So you're paying this license fee, have a dig deeper and starts searching on it, and then move up increasingly. You look at the range of services that Microsoft are rolling out now for like mid-tier, junior, and senior developers, and it's hugely impressive. And supported in a lot of cases along the way. There's a lot of Nathan can talk to this a lot more than I can, I'd say, but a lot of predefined models ready to go, safe environments and sandboxes to use that as well. So it's all there.
Yeah, thanks, Ruth. And Nathan, on the question of business case, that's a very powerful concept you've introduced very clearly in your slide deck, the need to build one. But sometimes it can be hard to identify hidden cost. You know, when you look at what is the real cost of getting something done, have you some advice on that, where people might be nervous about making sure that they've costed a project correctly?
Yeah, so there's always a bit of a risk that there's cost overruns, and that's where for us, it's the importance of actually not jumping straight into doing an implementation and doing that change. It's actually doing that deeper dive into your processes and understanding, you know, what actually are the processes. And Niall touched on it at the start. There is a move to start using process mining, which is a bit more data driven of what the actual process is. So, you know, I come from a consulting background. My associate days were spent with me interviewing people and doing workshops and creating detailed process maps. But I'm only as good as what the people in the room are telling me. I'm not actually seeing what's actually happening on the systems. So the ability to use process mining gives you a really clear view of what the actual process is. And that gives you that confidence level when you go to automate that you've got all the different variations, you've got all the exceptions, and you've got what actually is going on day to day. I think as well, having the ability to either support it internally if something changes. There's going to be inevitable changes that, you know, especially when you're using user interface, you know, stuff may change. If you're using a SaaS product, all you need is for that person, that organization to move where a box is and everything will fall over. So you do need to have a level of confidence that you're able to fix something quickly if it goes wrong. But you know, there is the same with deploying any new system and any new process. There is going to be stuff comes out of the woodwork, but for us, it's the discovery phase now of, you know, using the tools that we have at the disposal. You know, process advisors built in the Power Platform. You know, using that to record what goes on, get that as confidence level as high as possible, to take the risk out of any further implementations and any further rising costs.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Thanks, Nathan. From the audience, does anyone have any questions that you'd like to put to the panel?
There's a good one that someone put in actually in the chat around the role of IT professionals in the RPA implementation. So this is something that actually we've been getting involved with quite a lot with some of our customers, that either the business has driven forward the use of RPA and it's sort of case business led, and then it's becoming a IT turn up and go, what's all this, and get a bit concerned. So for us, it's actually, and I think Ruth, you touched on it, having the governance and sort of have all these processes in place. And I think that's where IT come in. The last thing you want to do is let the organization loose with automation, because they can take down systems and they can overload stuff. So actually having that governance and that security of, you know, you're able to do these things, or actually you pre-build automation. So it could be, you know, check how many holidays you have in the system. You build those automations and you push them out to the group. So, you know, people are saving a lot of time, you know, using centrally built things. So, you know, IT needs to be completely in part of this. You know, they're going to sit, these applications are going to sit in their network, they're going to sit in their infrastructure. They need to be part of the adoption and actually the governance of it, and hopefully they can use it as well within their teams.
Thanks, Nathan. Ruth or Trevor, do you have any thoughts on that topic as well?
I think it is somewhat of a challenge for organizations, where you have the business users understand the business logic and the process, but the IT function are the sort of the custodians of, as Nathan says, the security and the network and the load. And I suppose the challenge is really, how do you get those two cohorts working effectively together? Because the IT function make the change, but the business users sometimes don't know how to provide the requirements from a technical perspective. So I think, I suppose what we're seeing with some of these low-code platforms now is trying to split out those roles, where you can still let the business users work and develop in the process space, and the IT function really can focus in. And as Nathan said, I think, you know, with the low code that I've seen with some of the low code platforms, it allows still IT to provide the governance, but it allows the business to still innovate and manage and change the processes. So I think we're going to see more of an emergence of that, and obviously this layering in of AI and machine learning with that. So that's my thoughts on that.
Brilliant, thanks.
I'd probably just add to it, John, the very same. It has to be, depending on the organisation, but centrally managed by IT in the first instance, and then delivered by business users. And actually, it goes to a question that's come in there about citizen developers. What are some of the challenges you're seeing with citizen developers now, and that you'll anticipate will be problems in the future? I think what this really demonstrates is that visibility and communication and transparency in organization is really important to get this right. So if citizen developers think that they can deploy tools and go it alone, it's just going to be a very fragmented approach. It's not like it's not good for the organization in some level, but you have a central IT system that should be plugged in, operations staff that should be plugged in for greater success.
Yep, thanks. Makes perfect sense, Ruth. So if there are no further questions, we'll move on to the last section.
Well, there was an interesting one there. It says Gartner posted an article there. This around how are citizen developers being trained. Or sorry, the next one. Gartner posted an article this week saying in the title, no less, that there's no real difference between low code and no code. Is it more than a marketing concept? Doesn't this send confusion to the non-tech people? There is a difference, correct?
Yes.
I would say, yeah, absolutely. Like certainly some of the low code platforms that I've seen, like they don't even compile code, you know. So definitely there is a difference, and that's one of the strengths of them. What are your thoughts, Nathan and Ruth?
Yeah, like I completely agree. I was actually at a talk last week and this debate came up. So I think there's a misconception when you get into no or low code that you're not doing development work. But actually you still are doing development work, and actually coming from an engineering background is just as important, and it's allowing them to realize some of what they are building much quicker than they are with high code. So I do think there's a huge difference between low code and no code. No code is much more for the users. You know, there's less development. When you get into low code, you still need to know how to develop stuff. You still need to know how to write code. It's just a lot less.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, John. I think that's it.
Yeah, no problem, Trevor. Thanks for that. So thank you to the panel, Ruth, also.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, Trevor and Nathan. So we'll just move on to the final section. If there are no more questions, we will leave this part. I think we're okay with that. So just in final word, you know, how to engage with the Data Value Hub. The first thing we do with an enterprise is, when we talk with an enterprise, is to try and get a sense of where are they, where is your enterprise in relation to process maturity and digital maturity. So using this chart here, you know, a business like Intel and LeakSlip would be at number 5. They are using Lean Sigma in process maturity terms, and they're using AI in digital maturity terms. So they're up there in the top right box. Most of the businesses that are, you know, in the northeast of Ireland are probably at 3, and some are at 2 on this chart. So it's important to know where you're starting from. If you're when looking at RPA, where are you starting from? What's the environment in which you're operating? If you're very digitally mature, you tend to have a lot of data. If you're very process mature, you tend to have business users who have an appetite perhaps for advancing further into automation. So it's important to have a sense of that. You have to also assume that whatever business you're in, you have to assume that your competitors are probably looking at this technology, because it's so affordable and so reliable, and it's so easy to get a quick result, that inevitably more and more businesses are looking at this. So you really don't want to be the last enterprise in your sector to look at this. You know, that mightn't be wise. The other thing that we do, we assess incubator projects. So coming out of our conversations with enterprises, what we're looking at is concept for a new product, concept for a better way to run their business, or a concept to serve the customer. We then work with your enterprise to define that benefit, where we can see that you can make a commitment and where you have data, we then look at, well, how could we help you get started? And once you get started, to develop your own self-sufficiency. And part of your self-sufficiency is to develop the relationships with organizations who can provide you with services long-term, you know, to contract with them for maybe a new ERP system or whatever it might be. But our focus is very much on helping you get started on your digitization journey. Upskilling, which is what today is all about. We talk about today we talked a lot about robotic process automation. The other sessions that we've covered, back in April, we covered a lot on artificial intelligence. And then in about 2 weeks' time, we're going to be talking about productivity. So, and other topics in that area. So, you know, today was robotic process automation. In a couple of weeks, you know, how do you get productivity with Office 365? And then further on, AI with customer sentiment. Our office is in Monaghan. Our website is live. Our LinkedIn homepage is live. We're funded by Enterprise Ireland. We work with a number of national research centres. We also work very closely with Microsoft and Intel. I suppose the final word on this is we are in an era of accelerated digitization. COVID, we've seen more change during the past 12 months as a consequence of COVID than perhaps we saw in the previous 3 or 4 years. This is a world in which data is the new currency. And it's also a world in which possessing a data value mindset is a critical thing in every enterprise. So when you reflect upon your own business, your own enterprise, you know, are you clear about the value that you can extract from data? And robotic process automation is a technology which can help you with that, primarily focused at, you know, making decisions faster. So robotic process automation helps you make decisions faster, but you have to have the data in the first instance, and you have to have a desire to get value from that data. So that's it. Thank you, everybody, for participating today. And we look forward to catching up with you perhaps on a later event. This particular event will be published on our Data Value Hub YouTube channel, and you should be able to see the links for that through various social media channels like LinkedIn. Thank you very much, and take care. Bye now.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.